Welcome to the State Archives of North Carolina's tutorial on public records and confidentiality for local governments in North Carolina, Part 1. During this tutorial, you will learn about the public's rights to inspect public records, as well as confidentiality statutes that limit those rights. As the custodian of the public records you create, it is important to know which public records must be open to the public and which must be closed. In Part 1, we will look at public records law and the difference between confidential information and confidential records. In order to understand your rights and responsibilities towards public records, it's necessary first to understand what a public record is. This is an excerpt from General Statute 132, which defines public records in North Carolina. The defining characteristic of a public record is that it was made in the transaction of public business, regardless of whether it was created on a publicly or privately owned device. Public records can and do exist in any format, physical or electronic. Email, text messages, and social media postings can be public records the same way that paper memos, postal mail, and bulletins can be. General Statute 132 goes on to discuss the rights of the people to inspect their records. Any public record in North Carolina is subject to public inspection during reasonable times and under reasonable supervision. In order for records to be considered confidential in North Carolina, they must be made confidential by state or federal statute. Unless there is a specific statute that exempts a public record from public access, that record is considered open and must be allowed inspection by the public. This means if you, as a custodian of the public records you created, deny access to any of your records, you should be able to point to a specific statute that allows you to withhold access. Now that we understand what makes a record confidential, let's take a look at how these laws are applied in practice. Throughout this tutorial, we will be looking at examples of commonly requested records and information that may or may not be confidential. Consider, is your unlisted home phone number or the home phone number of any government employee confidential? There is no statute that specifically says home phone numbers are confidential, so this is not automatically confidential information. But the records that this information is stored on may be confidential records. We will have to check and see which records commonly include home phone numbers and whether these records are confidential or not. Employee phone numbers are often part of an individual employee's personnel file. North Carolina law has a number of statutes concerning the confidentiality of personnel files. The two listed here apply to almost all local government employees. Within both of these statutes, everything in an employee's personnel file is confidential except for the following information: name, age, date of original employment, the terms of the employee's contract, current position, title, current salary, date and amount of each increase or decrease in salary, date and type of each promotion, demotion, separation, or other change in position classification, date and general description of the reasons for each promotion, date and type of each dismissal, suspension, or demotion for disciplinary reasons, and, if the disciplinary action was a dismissal, a copy of the written notice setting forth the specific acts that are the basis of the dismissal, and the office to which the employee is currently assigned. When dealing with personnel records, however, There are a few other concerns that should be kept in mind. Who, within a given agency, can access the confidential parts of a personnel file? Within local government, this will depend on how your government is organized. Additionally, do applicants, former employees, and volunteers count as personnel? This can depend on which statute your agency falls under. When in doubt, please contact your analyst and we will help you. So, is that employee home phone number confidential? If the only copy of it is within a personnel file, then yes, it is. But what if it's part of a record stored elsewhere, like a disaster plan calling tree, or an employee directory that's circulated around the office? In the case of the calling tree, disaster plans are designated as confidential. Employee directories, however, are not. The answer, then, is that it depends on where the phone number is stored, whether the information is on a confidential record or not. This is the end of part 1 of this tutorial. In part 2, we will look at some more examples of confidential records and examine the difference between confidential records that can and cannot be disclosed.